In 1957, the Japanese film The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty debuted in theaters. While a decent production for the time, the film is by no means a classic, and it's long since fallen into obscurity. However, despite having been largely forgotten, the movie does leave behind a rather unique legacy. Because while the film was being shown in theaters, a young boy named Shigesato Itoi accidentally wandered into one of its screenings, during which he witnessed a scene in which a man gropes and murders a young woman. Being too young to truly understand the nature of what he was watching, Itoi became overwhelmed by a wave of deeply uncomfortable emotions. Emotions that he wasn't able to fully process at the time, thus embedding into him an unsettling mixture of confusion, fascination, and fear. This traumatic memory would resurface many years later when Itoi, then working on a sequel to the video game Mother, began the task of designing the game's final boss and its world's ultimate form of evil, Giygas. Earthbound is an RPG released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1994. The game centers around the adventures of Ness, an all-Eaglelandian boy growing up in the quiet suburbs of Onnet. One night, while investigating a recently fallen meteorite, Ness encounters a talking bee that foretells of a future where the Earth has been destroyed by an invading alien force, and that Ness and his newfound friends are the prophesized chosen ones destined to prevent this future from happening. Despite having a bit of a rough release in the West, Earthbound has since become an influential cult classic, with certain game designers citing it as a major source of inspiration. The game is primarily remembered for its strange and quirky sense of humor, in particular how it satirizes various video game mechanics through its self-aware writing. Yet despite being an overall silly and lighthearted adventure, Earthbound also has a reputation for being a little bit unsettling at times, and consisting of occasional dark moments that happen rather abruptly. For example, one moment you're playing as a young monk named Pooh, yes, that's his real name, undergoing some pretty standard training, and then suddenly you're in an empty void with a creepy face slowly tearing your body apart piece by piece. What the fuck? In storytelling, moments like these are effective in unnerving the audience simply because of how much of a jarring shift in direction they are against the context around them. By clashing with the already established tone of what their story is going for, these scenes tend to stick out more, and are more likely to burn themselves into the memory of the viewer. When done right, these tone shifts can help emphasize certain themes or information to the viewer, a reminder that there's an underlying contrast to what the story is telling. Or in some cases, they can serve as early indicators that the narrative is about to go in a very different direction. And perhaps Earthbound's most infamous example of this is with the game's final boss fight against Giygas. At long last, after making your way through a globe-trotting adventure, leveling your party up against a wide variety of enemies and monsters, you find yourself taking control of robot versions of Ness and his friends as they travel back in time to when Giygas was apparently at his weakest state. One could say it's almost as though you're aborting a feat. Up to this point, the exact nature of Giygas is still largely unknown to you, so you jump into the time machine not entirely sure what to expect on the other side. Yeah, Giygas is a pretty memorable villain for a reason. But what exactly makes this fight so distinct? Well, for starters, the unsettling human-like face engulfed in red and black certainly makes for a lasting first impression. The haunting lines that echo throughout the fight don't exactly help alleviate the mood either. Giygas has also been built up throughout the narrative as the endgame threat for the player to defeat, so of course one goes into this fight already expecting it to be dramatic and special. Beyond that, another immediate difference is that unlike all of the other foes in Earthbound, Giygas is not represented with an on-screen avatar for the player to attack, but instead through the background against which every other fight has taken place, which further conveys the concept of Giygas being so otherworldly and beyond human understanding that you recognize it not as a physical being, but rather a distortion of reality itself. Even the music manages to subvert expectations, as one of the song tracks that plays during this encounter, Pokey Means Business, starts off sounding like a standard 8-bit song, only to abruptly shift genres into metal partway through, which is a pretty cool touch. And then of course, there's the unique method in how Giygas is actually defeated. Over the course of the battle, it begins to dawn on Ness and his friends that no matter what kind of attack they throw at it, Giygas isn't breaking. Gradually, the psychic power of the four friends begins to dwindle. Fatigue sets in. All they can manage to do is struggle to survive against wave after wave of incomprehensible attacks, each one more relentless than the last. Despite how strong they've grown, despite everything they've done to prepare for this fight, all they can do now is pray. It's only through Paula's prayer and the encouragement of every ally the party made throughout their adventure is Giygas defeated. It's a fairly unintuitive strategy, since in any other encounter in the game, Paula's prayer ability is a complete dice roll regarding how effective it is. And while it does have its uses, to most players, it's not exactly their go-to option when in combat. Still, Giygas being defeated through a specific power fits in with Earthbound's recurring theme of bosses only being beaten through otherwise unusual means. It encourages the player to think somewhat out of the box, and rewards them for remembering key details about the characters and story. Giygas' legacy as one of the more iconic and memorable boss fights in classic RPGs is mainly due to how it seemingly clashes with everything the game had been up to that point, but it also drives home the subversive approach Earthbound took toward typical gaming conventions, an unconventional ending to an unconventional villain. But mostly because of how f***ing terrifying this thing was. So there you have it. I'm not really sure how to end this video, honestly, but in keeping with the theme of unexpectedness, maybe I'll just